Okay, so now we're going to move into some more logistical things like budgeting and fundraising, which is everybody's probably least favorite part about coaching if you have to do it. Um, and then also we're going to kind of move on with that same track of talking about winning, but more about what is the difference between winning versus success. And it kind of falls into understanding that concept and then implementing that into what we talked about last time with, winning at all costs. What is our boundary and what's more important? So let's start with the logistical stuff, budgeting and financing. Or fundraising. You guys are going to have to put together a budget. And the reason I'm having you guys do this is because when we think about coaching, a lot of the times we think about like the fun stuff, getting to still participate in our sport, getting to teach kids how to be better at something we love, and be competitive still and go to these games and do all this stuff. And so many times we don't know. I had no idea when I got into I pretty much went straight from I was an assistant GAV at a high school coach, and I went straight to being a college coach. And I had the educational background in regards to sports psychology, and I had taken a business like sports management class and a lot of classes in biomechanics and how to move the body and be good in that way. But I had never had experience managing a full budget and preparing a schedule and getting ready for travel and doing all these extra things that came along with it. And it had to be a very quick learning curve because when I got hired, it was summer and we started playing in August. My players came in and all of these things had to be ready. And when you're talking at a collegiate level, you're talking about a significant amount of money that you're in charge of. And there's no safety net. You can't go over your budget. You can't spend money that's not there. And I want to say, I can't remember exactly because it's been a few years now, obviously, but I want to say my budget was probably about $10,000. Period. And then I had to figure out, okay, uniforms, practice clothes, travel, paying officials for the volleyball matches, equipment, anything and everything that I would spend money on. Recruiting. If I went on a recruiting trip and I wanted money for gas or mileage, that had to come out of that $10,000. And I had to make sure that every single thing throughout that year, the season and then even into the spring year, I had the money there for it. And so you guys are going to create a budget, and I listed some things, in your assignment, but basically the big things that you want to think about is you have to pay for travel, period, and you have to have equipment, period. Granted, if you're going into a system that's already been there, they're going to have some equipment, but usually when you're talking about a sport like for volleyball, you pretty much have to get new volleyballs every year because they just get worn out and they start to go flat and all these things happen. Uniforms, you make a decision, okay? Maybe you partnership, if you're at a big school, big university, you're partnershiping with Adidas or something and you get these discounts. We didn't have that. And so at the college, we would buy a uniform and maybe use that jersey a couple years, however long they stayed in decent condition. But then we would buy, like a warm-up suit that they could wear to travel, practice t-shirt and spandex so they could practice, and we would have people do those, the laundry every day, like our managers would do the laundry every day. Shoes, knee pads, all the basic stuff. In my high school, I was actually at a little bit more wealthy of a high school. And so one of the benefits of them making varsity, only varsity, was that I would get them new jerseys every single year, and they always got to keep their jersey. Financially, that costs a lot more money, but those kids were willing to pay for it to make that happen. So you're going to have to kind of figure out where you're at, in a college setting. They can't keep them. They would have to buy them because you can't, there's all the rules, NCAA rules, things like that, where you can't give things away. But the big things that you need to worry about is your travel, because you got to be able to get where you're going and you have to be able to feed your players. You need to take into account your uniform, whether you want to include practice gear and play and game gear. Again, that's probably going to depend on what level you're at and what you're trying to provide. You're going to need to budget for officials for whatever sport it is. You could probably look up what they get paid per match, and then based on the schedule you made, how many ever home games you have, okay, those would be the things that you're paying for. If you're doing a sport that has any type of tournament, there's always going to be a tournament fee. So maybe try to look that up and guess how much that would be. In a sport like football, you're not going to a tournament, so there's not an entrance fee. Something that's kind of interesting in college sports, and again, I didn't know this until I became a coach there, is oftentimes if a team really wants to play you for whatever reason, like we were a D2 school, like I said before, but we were really small. So our men's basketball program, he would actually get paid to go play D2 teams sometimes because our ranking of Division 2, if they beat us, would give them more points than if they were playing a lower level school like an NAIA school and beat them. There's this whole point ranking system. And so certain schools that wanted an easy win, but of a Division 2 school, would contact our coach and say, hey, we'll pay for your travel to come here. We'll pay you $500 to your team if you come and play us, so that's kind of interesting. But anyways, so in your budget, equipment, uniform, travel, officials, and then kind of included in the travel, you have food, but you also have food for, like, if you have a home game and you're in a college setting and you miss the students miss the open hours at the cafeteria, even if it's a home game, you're required to feed them. So keep that in mind. Some of these things won't apply if you're at high school. Like if you're at a high school, you don't have to feed them, because they're just coming to their game at home. But you should feed them on away games if you're at a tournament. If it's an away game and they're just riding with their parents or something like that, again, you don't have to be responsible for that. But in high school, middle school, whatever level it is, you're still going to have to figure out how much your uniform is going to cost, how much is it going to cost you to participate in tournaments, games, whatever, officiating, that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. Okay. Fundraising, you guys are going to do an assignment where basically you're going to try to find what you think would be the best fundraiser for your particular sport, your particular team. You can't repeat them, so make sure you see what has already been posted before you choose to talk about a certain fundraiser. And again, this is super important because most budgets don't have enough money. The high school I was at, I actually didn't get any money. I had to raise all of my money for anything that I did volleyball related, including equipment, uniform, paying the officials. And so again, I was lucky I was at a wealthy high school, so my kids just wrote me a check unless they had trouble, and then we figured out a fundraiser for them. But we always did concessions, and any money that I made on my gate for people coming in to watch the games also went into my budget. But so keep those things in mind. Let's just touch a little bit on the winning versus success. So again, you guys are going to watch some clips, and you're going to kind of see what some of these people are saying. And the idea is for you, again, to kind of open up your mind and start thinking about what is your philosophy in this. And as a coach, as a player, you don't really think about it as much, I don't think, because you're just in a different environment. But your coach is kind of the one that produces that environment. And so as a coach, you have to be very cognizant of what are you trying to accomplish with your program. Is it winning? Is that all that matters? Is it okay if you have an undefeated state championship team or undefeated national championship team, whatever level you're at, but have players that aren't passing their classes, that are in trouble with the law, that are disrespectful, things like that. And so, and who may or may not make it after this, part of their life is over. Or is it more important that, again, you are creating successful people? Are you making sure that kids who struggle in class have an opportunity and can better themselves, so that in the long run they'll have an education, they'll have a degree, they'll have something, to fall back on? Are you making sure that you're implementing positive traits in those individuals? How to be a good person, how to be kind, how to give back, how to, work with other people, how to deal with anger, how to, cope with things in life like stress and failure and all of these different things that happen. For you as an athlete, these are good things to think about as well. Like, what does success mean to you? What would make you feel like you're successful? And if the only thing that comes to mind is winning, then maybe you want to reevaluate that, because we're not always going to win in life. And that's, it's sad to say, and but there's going to be a time. Everybody fails at some time, and that doesn't mean you're not successful. So, my personal philosophy and what I tried to implement was making sure kids could be successful outside of the sport. Did they do what they needed to do in school? Are you a good person? Do you help others when they need it? Whatever their sense of what they wanted to achieve, how could I help foster that? So those are some of the things that you really need to think about. And like I said, you're going to watch some videos that kind of talk about, being successful and how maybe some people view that differently in regards to winning, or what's being produced in an athlete from a coaching standpoint. And so I'm excited to see what some of you guys have to say about that, and maybe some of the conversations that argument will bring forward. So make sure that you, in your budget, take into account all those things I mentioned, the officiating, the travel, all of that. And then make sure when you do your fundraiser, you pick one that somebody else hasn't picked. And I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say about the being successful versus winning.